All right, just as we did last week, we're going to wait until it goes live on LinkedIn. So,
what's up?
But this means people on YouTube get a kind of a bonus show, don't they? They get a little extra they didn't pay for.
That's so exciting too, isn't it?
I feel like we're like Cirque du Soleil. But this is the show before the show. You know, before all Cirque du Soleil shows, right? They have the clowns come out. I guess that makes us clowns for a while.
Nice. All right, still not started. But anyway,
yeah.
All right, just take that off for a minute. Yeah, cool.
Yep.
All right, and good week, everyone.
And for those of you wondering what's going on right now, waiting for the YouTube. Well, YouTube's gone live already, but we're waiting for LinkedIn to catch up. It's a story of tech, basically.
Yes.
All right. And it's live.
An excellent story of tech.
All right.
Okay. Well, welcome along. Okay, let's get the show going. 3, 2, 1, and go.
To the shit show. My name's Andrea Edwards.
My name's David Coe. How's that?
Oh, Richard's frozen.
Richard is frozen. He's and over there in the bottom left corner is Richard, my friend.
And my name is Joe Augustine, and we want to welcome you to the show that is trying to solve the poly crisis. Well, not solve, but deal with it, wrap our heads around it collectively. And so a few quick things. One is we hope you'll like and subscribe to this so that you can share it with other people. We always say just invest in it right now. Give us the like, and if by the end of the show you need to take it back, that's fine as well. The poly crisis basically is all the stuff that's going wrong in the world at the same time. So we also try to get ourselves some diverse views, and we do have a guest with us. We'll tell you about our guest in just a moment. But before we get to that, very excitingly, one of us has got a new book come out. Now, I know I wouldn't ever be able to do that. And, well, Andrea is pretty busy with everything. So it leaves us to wonder who it is that's left. Okay. Who's got the new book? Show us the new book.
Who's the piggy in the middle that's stuck with it, right?
Yep.
Yes. So let me bring it up. And I wanted to show, actually, there is a I'll put it in the chat or something later, so you can all follow that along, which is that there is a publisher's code as well for a 20% discount. So for anyone who wants to pre-order with World Scientific Press, the book is called Thriving at Nature's Pace. What is it about? It's basically a financial proposal mechanism to allow you to pick your own barrel of oil that you want to keep in the ground and make money doing it. That sounds pretty good, right? And it actually addresses why you might find that difficult, because we all feel what happens if we leave it in the ground. We can get stuck and all of those things. And so it goes through a actual kind of process of trying to think how you might be able to go and do that. And if you're a young person, a young professional, this book is really intended for you, because you're the ones who need to do this most. Old fogies like me, or the baby boomers and all of those things, we've said it on many times. We are the ones that are kind of demanding more, and we need more of the resources on the planet. And today's guest, Chetan, is going to tell us about his work that merges very nicely with the theme of the book here, which is that we can actually let it go. And if we do that, nature becomes much more abundant, and that's nature's pace. So have a look at that. If you work in finance, if you work in business, if you work in community, if you work in environment, this book is for you. If you feel that you can't really trust governments to get it going, that's why this is for you.
Yeah, I'm going to just sell that line. If you want to tell your friends about the book, tell it this way: someone's advising you to buy oil to save the world, and that's going to be very intriguing to them. All right, so we always try to have a diverse voice as well, more diversity on the show. So we bring in interesting guests, and so David's mentioned him momentarily. Professor Chetan Singh Solanki is a climate action leader, innovator, and educator, and has dedicated his life to tackling the climate crisis through lifestyle change and energy independence. He recently resigned from IIT Bombay to focus 100% on tackling the climate emergency, and is relentless in his drive to spark a transformation in people's minds towards climate action and sustainability. with a commitment to helping us embrace mindful consumption and energy independence. He's recently launched the Finite Earth Movement, FEM, with a vision to transform finite living into a global mass movement. And his goal is to mobilize 1 billion people worldwide for climate action by 2027. FEM is rooted in the simple truth: on a finite planet, consumption itself must also be finite. So, Prof. Chetan, welcome to the show, and I must also say a very special thank you to your tech support. Who, if I'm not wrong, is it your daughter?
No, she is my team member. So thank you very much for having. Her name is Prachi.
Ah. Well, it was a younger person whose frantic actions seconds into the seconds before the show started that got us all live together. So welcome to the show, Prof. Chetan.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks to all of you.
There was a lot that you said in your bio that got me excited about listening to you today. But your 1 billion people, that's a message I also have. We need 1 billion people imperfectly changing, and then that billion need to recruit the next 4 billion so that we can really make momentum. So I was happy with the focus on 1 billion. But what else? What would you like to share with us about you and your life, your story before you started your pilgrimage? Would you like to share?
Well, I come from a very small village in India, very tiny village, just a population of 800 people. And I was lucky to get education at the top institution in India. I did my doctorate from Belgium in Europe, and I was professor at the very premier institution in India, IIT Bombay. Well, I was doing all this. I'm also one of the teacher of art of living. So I teach yoga and meditation. So in a way, I'm lucky in life to have all these various perspective of a small village, of a big world, of a high-tech society, of a spiritual world. I think as a result of this, I'm able to see the world from very different perspective, and that allows me to see, what is wrong in this world and what is right in this world, and how to, choose the right things and let go the wrong things, so that we can all live sustainably on this planet.
Nice. We've got Brigadier Sushil calling in from India as well. So good to have you here, Sushil. All right, David, now you just popped out. Are you all right? Oh, wait.
We're having tech issues this morning. What can I say?
You dodge someone on the street and you walk into them. All right, David.
Having a bit of a home tech issue. How do I pronounce your name again, just so I get it right?
Chetan Singh Solanki.
Chetan Singh Solanki. So what would you like to be called? How would you like us to call you?
Just Chetan or Professor Solanki, whichever you feel comfortable.
Okay. So we got in touch on LinkedIn, and obviously my aim is, how can we understand better our relationship with nature and encompass kind of how our finance actually understands that. But you've taken on a very, very incredible move where you've actually gone on a journey and a trip. And when we first talked, you talked about Mahatma Gandhi and what he did in that way. So would you like to give us that kind of story of origin, as it were, in some ways, so we can understand better about the move that you're creating? It's not just sitting at your desk doing this. You're doing something really remarkable.
Yeah. So basically in 2019, we were celebrating 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. So I traveled across the world. Literally, I traveled 30 countries, spread the idea of non-violence to environment. And we do not realize, but when we use carbon-based energy, when we use coal or diesel or petrol, in a way we are, throwing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And that I call as a violence to the nature and violence to the environment. And when we celebrate 150th year of Mahatma Gandhi, I thought I should travel across the world, teach young students how to make their own solar lamp, and study in that solar lamp and take a pledge of non-violence to environment. And I got a chance to travel to Europe, Africa, America, South America, Asia, everywhere. And once I finished my travel, I found one thing common in all the countries, rich countries, poor countries, developed countries, developing countries. You know what is common in the entire world? Traffic jams. So I saw traffic jam everywhere. In Uganda, there is a traffic jam. In Washington, traffic jam. In Paris, there is a traffic jam. And I kept wondering, one or two country can go wrong in planning. How come every country can go wrong in planning? And that is where I could realize that something is wrong in this world, and that wrong we can call it as a climate change. And there's a very clear signal of how climate has changed. So once I finished my yatra and I was settled down back to my work, and I started thinking, if Mahatma Gandhi would have been here on this planet right now, what he would have done to solve such a problem when the whole world is going in a wrong direction. And Mahatma Gandhi, whenever we think of him, you can think of two things. One is fasting, and other is yatra, some kind of a journey. I am a kind of a person, I can't live without eating food 3-4 hours, so I can't do fasting. So my choice was very simple, that I should do yatra, a journey. But because climate change is such a big global problem, it's about 8 billion people, and so you can't do a journey of 1 year or 2 year or few years. You have to dedicate at least a decade of your life. Second, also very important decision that I have taken is that normally the way we work, we enjoy weekend, there are festivals, there are summer holidays, winter holidays. I thought if I take breaks in between this journey, you can't solve a global problem like climate change in part and parcel. So I have taken another decision of my life, which is much tougher, is to not go home for 11 years. So last time when I was at my home, it was 2020, and next time when I will go my home, it is going to be 2031. And by the way, I'm a married person. I have 2 daughters. But in India, we have this idea that when you take a pledge of something, you get the strength of finishing such a task. And solving the problem of a climate change, a global problem, we need that kind of intense effort every single hour during those 11 years. And that is what I'm trying to do. And that is the whole purpose of my journey, to reach out to people and talk to them that this problem is not about the technology or policy or just planting trees. This problem is about understanding our life itself. And once you understand the life and its connection with the nature, I think the solution is much simpler. That is what I'm trying to do with my Energy Swaraj Yatra. And in the last 5 years, I have traveled across the country. I met lakhs of people. I have given some 1,700 talks, and I have learned a lot. And finally, I feel that after 5 years, I am ready to a good understanding. I can offer a solution to the world that world can take, and we can collectively work together to solve the problem of climate change and make this world livable for our future generation.
I have to.
So I was just going to ask, would you mind explaining to everyone what a yatra is, but also tell everyone how you're crossing the country, because I think they're both interesting.
Yeah, so yatra means a kind of a journey, and my journey is of 11 years. It's a non-stop 11 years journey. And when you're going to travel non-stop for 11 years, you need to take care of your health, your food, your sleep, your work, everything. So what I have done is I have designed a bus. Bus has become my home. And this is not a normal bus. If you Google search Energy Swaraj Yatra, you will get thousands of pictures of this bus. So this bus is my home. There is a bed inside, there is a kitchen inside, there is a washroom inside, there is a library inside, there is an office inside, there is a temple inside, and also a small garden inside the bus. And there are solar panels on the top, and those panels generate enough power to run the household operations, like cooking food, charging laptop, fan, etc. It cannot drive the engine, but the household operations are all driven by the solar power.
Awesome.
So I have to ask this. So I have a family also, and how do they come to? What did they say to you when you said, "Look, I'm going to disappear off for 11 years. I'll see you when you finish high school, whatever it is." I mean,
did you start the conversation? So like, well, how would you feel if I went away for 3 months? Build up
Well,
to
I
it.
mean, David, I know that I knew that for my family it was going to be a very, very, hard, very harsh thing also to even hear. So in India, we say something, जोर का झटका धीरे से, which means if you want to give a massive news, you give it, point by point, slow, 1.1.8, and so I took 6 months to actually convey this message while I was planning. So I used to say something that, listen, we should do something. I'm a professor, I can understand energy, everybody cannot understand. So everybody cannot do. I should take care. I should do the lead, I should lead the way, etc. And then one fine evening, over the dinner table, after dinner, I told my children, listen, I need to talk to you something very important, very serious. And I remember telling them that, look, 11 years journey means that I'm going to live in a bus. I'll be away all the time, and we'll meet only on kind of phone and in some places outside. To this response, one of my younger daughter responded that, so what? It doesn't matter. You are anyway traveling all the time. So how does it matter that you are away for 11? that actually made me very light, that they're mentally they are not going to be shocked. What is this fellow is doing for 11 years? And believe me, it is such a tremendous support that I get my family. And a lot of people in India tell me that if we go home, couple of hours late, we start getting calls from home. Wife starts calling. How your wife allowed you to, be away for 11 years? So it's really great sacrifice of my wife and children that they allowed me to do that, and without cribbing. It has been almost 5 years and there is no cribbing from their side. In fact, they keep pushing me that I should become more famous, that I should do more thing, I should connect with so and so people, I should do this, I should do that. So I've been, as I said, lucky one to be able to get this opportunity to pursue what I feel is the right thing to do.
Is there a moment for you, or an event, or is there something that made you realize you had to do something explosive to make a point? Is there or was it an accumulation of different things? What was that time?
Well, Andrea, I mean, when I was traveling across the world, I because I'm a professor of energy, solar energy, my doctorate in solar energy, and I come from a small village, and I could start making connection that the whole world is a play of energy. In India, we say that, in fact, two types of energy: the internal energy and the external energy. Internal energy that will keep us enthusiastic, positive, and if you're low in energy, we'll feel irritated, negative. Similarly, the outer world is also driven by energy, but unfortunately, I call it the wrong energies, the carbon-based energy, or even I call them dark energies. And when world is driven by dark energy, you will have a dark output, right? There will be negative output of it. So I could see the connection that when I brush my teeth, actually I'm emitting carbon dioxide. When I'm wearing clothes, my shirt, I'm emitting carbon dioxide, because to make a shirt, you need to plow the field, you need to run the tractors, diesel, fertilizers, pesticides. So many operations are required. So wearing a shirt is not just wearing a shirt; it is carbon emission. In fact, for that matter, because 80 to 85% of the world is running on carbon-based energy, so every minute of our life we are emitting carbon dioxide. And because it is about 8 billion people, so we need to correct it through 8 billion people. I keep explaining to my student, even 4 billion people reduces carbon emission and other 4 billion people do not, we are still in trouble, because carbon dioxide has no boundaries. So which means that it is about billions of people, and you cannot bring billions of people on board sitting in office, writing research paper, writing books. And that is exactly when I thought that I should do something, and I should do something not for the sake of doing it, but really bringing the change in the world. And then the choice was very obvious that one has to reach out to the masses, to bring this message. And that is how this idea came in. By the way, Andrea, a lot of people ask me, and jokingly I always tell them, they ask me, what is your inspiration to do such a yatra? And I always say, when there is a tiger behind you, you don't get inspiration to run. You just run, right? The problem is that I can see the tiger behind me, and most people cannot see the tiger behind me. And the whole job of my journey is to show them that there is a tiger behind you also.
Yeah.
I love
Certainly.
the explanation you have and the way you kind of describe it. So and I really like this part about energy. I think people completely misunderstands this in that way. There is this strong movement to say what we need to do is to have more renewable energy, replace our battery. How do you feel about that as the step?
Well, initially I used to feel good about it, because I'm a professor of solar energy. I wrote books on solar. In fact, if you Google search my name, people in India call me Solar Man of India, because when I came to India, I pushed solar energy to great way. So people refer me as Solar Man of India. But when I realized, I started teaching people the rule number one of using solar energy is do not use solar energy, because solar panel doesn't come from the God's home, right? You have to mine material, you have to mine silicon, you have to mine aluminum, you need to mine copper, you need to mine iron, you need to inverter, battery, so many things. This eye-opening experience came in Gujarat. One of our state in India is called Gujarat. It's a very developing state, and when I went there with my journey, I saw every third, fourth household is installed solar panel. So initially I was very happy, but after some 15 20 days I became sad, because after my lecture one professor came to me and said, Professor Solanki, thank you so much, you have opened our eyes. And I said, what happened? He said, my sister called me and said, brother, I have installed 6 kilowatts solar system on my rooftop, and earlier there was one air conditioner, now I have installed 3 air conditioner in my house. So the whole problem is that solar energy is good for solving the problem only if you limit your consumption. What people are trying to do, they are trying to put more solar, and because solar comes from the mining earth, you have to dig somewhere, you have to refine somewhere, you have to put chemicals, you have to at the end of life you have to recycle material. So therefore solar also has an environmental cost, much less than carbon based sources, but it has a non-zero cost. So blind use of any technology, be it solar, be it wind, be it green hydrogen, be it any technology, I think you cannot make any blind use of any technology. Eventually you will have to pay the cost. And I keep saying, David, the modern people, which means all of us, we are the smart people. What we do, we solve one problem and create 2 more problems. So the way we are using renewable energy, we are going to end up with another problem. So I believe that the rule number one of using any technology is don't use it, because there is always some side effect. Use it very carefully, very cautiously, then only you're doing the right things.
I love this comment about when you solve one problem, you create 2. And I'm going to put my old kind of investment hat on and say that's growth, because now I got 2 problems to solve, and then I can afford. And how do you face that? I mean, I'm sure you must have come across that on your journey with people who look at it the other side and says, if you don't do this, then there'll be less things to do, and then that will be a bad thing. There'll be no jobs, there'll be fewer jobs, and there'll be less income for people.
Well, it's very, very common understanding of the people in the world that, if you want to grow economy, you need to produce more, you need to consume more, we need to want to create more jobs. But I think that is very narrow understanding of the life itself. I keep asking 3 questions to people, and I don't get any answer from anywhere. The first question is, why should I grow? What is the purpose of my growth? Why any country want to grow GDP? And they say, sir, because prosperity increases with growth. I said, great. In the last 20 30 years in India, I can tell you that our GDP has been growing with the rate of 5 6 7 8 9%. And I keep asking people, if 5% growth in GDP means 5% increase in prosperity, it should also mean 5% increase in smiles. But rather than increasing smile, what is happening? Depression is increasing, stress is increasing, violence is increasing, air pollution is increasing, soil pollution is increasing, global warming is increasing, climate change is increasing. So I think we have lost the purpose of growth. Why should I grow? The second question I asked, how much to grow? Is there any parameter? Is 5% growth is enough, or 7% is enough, or 10% is enough, or 20%? Nobody has any idea. And the third question is, how long should we grow? When is the time when we say, now it is enough and I'm all comfortable and I achieved the best parameter of my life? Nobody knows the answer. So how much to grow, how long to grow? If you do not know the answer to this question, then growth is like a driving a vehicle without any brake. And if you drive a vehicle without any brake, only one thing will happen, that is an accident. And it looks like humanity has already met an accident, or very soon we are going to meet an accident.
Mhm.
Again, just onto that, I think the only kind of cells in our body that grows the way you're describing, which is so many percent each time and doesn't have a limit to how when it's sufficient to grow, is a cancerous one. Those are the cells that actually do as you say. So I think what you're describing is really interesting. But are people frightened by what you say?
Well, no, they're not frightened. I mean, I have figured out there are 3 Ds which are a problem. Why people are not. I mean, sometimes, first of all, they sometimes feel. I say it's a distance. They feel the problem is so distant that it doesn't, uh, bother them. Second D is diffusion. Because people feel that everybody is part of the problem. So how does it matter? How does my action matter? And third time, when you actually go more deeper, they sometimes become despair that, well, if it is already bad, what can I do? So distance, diffusion, and despair. They're the 3 Ds of the climate, or to say ignorance or numbness of the society. The climate numbness, you can say. Uh, well, they are not frightened, but there is a very thin line up to which we can push their understanding, because beyond that line, they all lose hope and say that, okay, I can't do anything. So in 5 years, I have learned that balance is very, very delicate, and there's a very thin line that we need to walk on.
What about developments in solar technology? Because there's more and more sort of coming out, and you're the professor, so we can ask you: are you seeing anything that gives you hope that's like using less resources? Are you seeing anything positive in that on that side?
Well, Andrea, I think what I have discussed with David earlier also, that if we really want to solve the problem, let us listen to Einstein, the famous scientist Einstein. He's one of the famous quote he said. In fact, there are a couple of quotes that I love to use all the time. One is the Einstein quote. He said, "You cannot." The very same consciousness that has created the problem cannot be used to solve the same problem.
No.
Right? That is one very beautiful quote, which means it is the more use of technology that has created the problem, and you cannot solve the problem by more use of technology. You can't solve it by more solar, by more wind, by more this, by no. You have to have a different approach. Similarly, there is another beautiful quote of E.F. Schumacher from Small is Beautiful. He said that any intelligent fool can make things can make things bigger, complex, and violent. It takes touch of a genius to make things simpler and smaller. So what we need to do, we can't create more complex systems around us that any stupid can do it. What we need is, we need more simplified structures, energy generation structures, the work generation structure that are localized. Then I think we are somewhere close to solving the problem. World doesn't seem to understand it. What I'm saying is, the world is making it even more complicated by more connecting it together. And more we are connected, the more fragile we become. One event in one part of the world is affecting everybody else in the other part. I think that is not a smart design that modern people have come up with. So I don't think technology is a solution to the problem anyway. And therefore, Andrea, in my classes, what do I teach? If you want to solve any problem, first, most people try to learn how to do it. And I first teach what not to do, and then I teach how to do it. First, you have to learn what not to do. That is very important learning, because everybody is trying to jump on doing something to solve the problem, And I keep saying, not doing something is the solution.
I like that. And from I have to kind of bring this up along. The world's largest coal company by volume is Coal India, which is a state-owned company. And in the recent period, it's really been saying that the need for air conditioning, the 3 air conditioning that you put in, has become important. And we know as climate change comes along, the heat waves and the high humidity is making conditions where you actually do need some form of cooling, as it were, in some form or other. So what would you say to that? I mean, the Indian government is very much kind of, well, I think it's come forward to say it's not going to have a particular sort of plan for net zero and things until 2070 effectively, and so on. You must have come across people from that side, from either the economics and the policy side, and they promote this part from their side of saying, look, as climate change worsen, we are going to need this energy that we can readily access.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so my approach to the entire problem and the solution is very different than 99% people the way they think, and that is why I believe that that is why things are not working. We are not able to solve the problem despite all kind of policy making, technological development, because one of my famous quote that I keep saying, cancer cannot be treated by taking paracetamol. And what most people do is take paracetamol. And that is where I say, no, I also believe that number one, this problem is not created. The problem of climate change is not created by the governments and by the corporations, because they are the producers of the services and the products. But eventually, you and I are the consumer. You and I decide what to buy. You and I decide whether to use air conditioner or not. You and I decide whether to buy a small car or a big car, how much temperature to set, etc. So therefore, in my understanding of the world, and that I traveled and studied across the world, I believe that each individual is a part of the problem, because I am the consumer and I drive the consumer chain, the supply chain, and therefore I'm responsible. So therefore, in correction also, I don't have much hope for any government. It doesn't matter whether it's Indian government or American government or Japanese government, because governments are elected for a very short time, 4 to 5 years. They have limited resources, limited time, and therefore they will never be able to take appropriate steps that is actually required to solve the problem. They will always be running in that short-term approach, because they are authorized to do only short-term thinking. And that is why I don't blame if government of India will come and say, no, we need to put more coal because our energy demands are increasing. Rather, actually, my approach is always, can we not educate billion people and say, hello, we can actually do more appropriate use of electricity by avoiding the misuse of electricity, by avoiding the overuse of electricity, by efficiently using electricity, so that your electricity requirement goes down so significantly that you can all put solar and become decentralized, independent, power generation for your own house, your own operation. I think that is the ideal scenario. What I would say Mahatma Gandhi would see today, that how we can be locally self-sufficient. And when you are locally self-sufficient, that is the most efficient system that you can generate, not just for electricity, for your food, for your clothes, for your other needs. And I think that is where the solution lies. And it cannot be obtained by the government or corporates alone.
Yeah. Can I just want to just sort of expand on what you're saying, because totally 100% agree with everything you've just saying. I'm in Asia. I'm in Singapore now. I was in Thailand. So the last few heat extremes we went through, not as bad as what you suffered in India. And I'm sure on your travels, you've been in the middle of some of those heat extremes. So it's going to get warmer. The fastest growing industry in the world is the air conditioning industry. They still have the cheapest units on the market, which are the most polluting units, which I know, the domestic maid that lives in the slum in Mumbai was, celebrated in her neighborhood because she was the only person able to afford an air conditioner. And that's just going to ripple out, because it's going to become a matter of survival. So in the coming years, while it gets warmer, there is a need to survive in these extreme heat events. So, but what most people don't realize is that people in Asia, so compared to our neighbors, their doors are open. It feels like 40 degrees outside. They've just got the fans on. We're sweltering with the air conditioning on because it's too hot for us, because the humidity is too high, because our bodies just can't cope, right? But as we look ahead to the future, this explosion in need to be able to keep your family cool is going to be necessary, because it's only going to get hotter. So I agree with you, and that local sort of focus locally, like having if you're in a community, have a local cooling shed where everyone can go and cool down and have that centralized energy and all that sort of stuff. But I think there's in the next few years, we're going to see a demand that's necessary for survival. And of course, it's also potentially going to be pushing people to the point of actually leaving. And then we've got the climate refugee crisis on our hands. So I don't know. So that's my only thing. It's like, I totally agree with what you're saying, but at the same time, the reality is it is going to get worse, and people are going to want to survive, and they're going to do whatever it takes to survive. So just
of course, yeah. No, that is true. It is going to happen like that. But I have just prepared a report, Andrea, where I've studied the electricity sector in India, and there is a growth of about 7 to 7.5% electricity is growing every year. Now, of course, let it grow. But what I'm saying is, while you grow, while your new demands are coming for new lights, new fans, new computer, new air conditioner, can we not avoid the misuse, overuse, and inefficient use of electricity? So, if you want to grow 7%, great. Can we not offset that 7% with misuse, overuse, inefficient use, and then put some solar? So what I'm saying is, yes, as we grow and as we fulfill our needs, and as you rightly said, that as the temperature grow, it becomes, it becomes a necessity to survive. Then my job, and if I'm intelligent and if I'm a good policy maker, what I will do is I will try to figure out how do I offset it without generating more and more and more. If I keep generating more and more and more by whatever means, whether it is coal or gas or even solar, I have to pay the environmental cost, which is going to multiply or accelerate the climate change itself. So if I am a smart person, and if I understand the energy picture and futuristic scenario, I think I can still play out this game cautiously without really adding a lot of new extra generation.
Yeah. So Brigadier Sushil's he's just asking, so I think it's important for everyone to understand India as a nation, but the per capita waste and energy use is significantly lower than the rest of the world. So you guys are already, you're in overshoot, but you're not as much in overshoot as countries like Australia or America. But what Sushil is saying is people have conditioned themselves to comfort, and the usual response is, tell me something practical. They will call this impractical, but when it's actually survival. But thoughts?
Well, I mean, obviously, I mean, so what I'm saying is, if Indian starts living the way Americans and Europeans are living, then there is no hope for the world. And I can tell you that, when 1.4 billion people follow the same per capita consumption, then you're gone. What I'm saying is, we can be much more smarter. We don't have to make the same mistakes that others are doing. Because I always go beyond, and having a spiritual background, I can tell you that the purpose of life is not just be more comfortable through technology or through air conditioning. I think we will be, when we grow in the knowledge, when you grow in moral values, ethical values, spiritual values, and of course economic values, that is what I call is the balanced growth. So when we start, I keep asking all my students, why do we eat ice cream? We can all survive without eating ice cream. What is the purpose of eating ice cream? And then ultimately it is all about, because I feel good. Why I want to look good? Because I feel good. Why should somebody praise me? Because I feel good. So, Andrea, when you understand the life, eventual purpose of every single act is only one. I want to be peaceful. I want to be joyful. I want to be loving. So, I've in one of my book, I have written this, desire pyramid of desires. So basic pyramid, base of the pyramid is what I call is survival desires. Roti, kapda, makan means food and shelter is what you are looking for. Once you fulfill that desire, you go to the next level of desire that is called tribal desire. When you want to do more of everything, more clothes, more comfort, more bigger car, more travel, more exposure. And once you go beyond that state of desire, I call it as the arrival desire. That is your destination of life, where you want to be loveful, joyful, peaceful. So survive, thrive, and eventually arrive. The most of the world is stuck at the thrival level. And I think once we cross, we don't need same per capita electricity consumption, energy consumption that others are doing, and we can be much more healthier and much more happier than anybody else. By the way, I think I shared with David at my home. I'm a professor of IIT Bombay, very premier institution. At my home, there is no refrigerator, there is no geyser, there is no air conditioner we have ever installed. I don't iron my clothes. I buy very minimum material, only what is required. And I can tell you, I'm more healthy and happy than anybody else. So what I'm saying is, because when we understand bigger thing, I think this all materialistic thing, yes, very much important to a certain extent, but we cannot just run behind it and ruin our own life and our children's life, and make their life miserable and leave them a planet where they cannot breathe clean air, where they cannot drink clean glass of water, and they cannot eat chemical free food. I think nothing can be more disaster and more criminal than living behind a planet like that for our children.
Totally.
Yeah,
So
I couldn't agree
I'm
more.
going to go on, Richard.
No, I
Richard?
couldn't agree more. And I think we come philosophically from a very similar starting point, although your life experience is obviously very different from mine, having grown up in Sweden, lived in Europe. And I really, really like your reference to growth. And I'm quite taken aback and I would say almost shocked by the extreme focus we've developed particularly in the Western world, but it's definitely spreading to make growth effectively a target variable for how we are supposed to run our economies. To me, growth is just the outcome of having made the right choices and
Absolutely
done the right things. And then, if you do things well, of course you will have growth in however we choose to define it or measure it or whatever, and all the problems we have associated with that. But I can promise you, if you make it the target, you will end up doing some stuff you really regret to get to that target.
true. Absolutely.
But Richard, Richard is a proud capitalist, right? So
absolutely,
we need to mention that. But when you were talking about growth, right? So GDP growth, sort of 3% every year worldwide, right? But within 25 years, that means double. That means double, right? Yeah. So that's a problem, and we can't double with all the extraction that comes along with it. So so I know we can talk about it with the global economy later with Richard, but to me that's always the problem. But I wanted to Shadrach's here, and he's saying. Wait a minute. There's two comments. Have I missed one? He's saying it's a solarization is essential, but he's concerned about the technical knowledge on production and utilization of these technologies in developing countries and economies, which I agree with. And then he's asked you a fundamental element in the climate positive growth, where the low consumption in developing economies is a positive aspect that can help us achieve effective climate action. So I call it, we need a new middle class stream. So when I heard you talking about, the consumption and because I've been on this journey of simplifying my life. I bought one item of clothing this year. I haven't been on a plane for 12 months. I'm doing whatever I can in every way I can. I don't put any pressure on anyone else. I'm just trying to do it. And there's a peace within me when I do this. It's not a sacrifice. It's it gives me minutes to sit in the garden and look at the butterflies rather than running hell for ever chasing something, anything, but in Asia, the chase is still very much alive. I had 7 years in Phuket and I've come back to Singapore, and I feel like the pace is so much faster than what I left behind, but there's fear behind the speed. Because everyone's scared about AI and losing their jobs, and obviously people are scared about the tiger behind them, even if they haven't identified what that tiger is. We all know the tiger's behind us. So I think there's an energy in the world that's really different, and it's on one side I feel despair, and on the other side fear, but that fear's been translated into this forward motion that doesn't make any sense based on the reality of what we face. So, because a lot of what you're saying is a very spiritual thing, and David and Richard talk about it too. We need to go through a consciousness shift of epic proportions.
Yeah. There is, I mean, I have been, as I said, there is no other choice to the humanity if we really want to survive. By the way, I also wrote a book which is going to be published by Penguin. It is going to come out in December. And where I have analyzed the entire situation, I looked the whole world as a play of energy, and the forces of positive energy and negative energy, and how it is shaping up the world, or in a positive and negative way. And eventually, the way things are unfolding, what will happen towards the end of century, 75 years from now. And therefore, it's a question of whether we want to survive or we want to thrive. In the path for survival and path for thrival are very different paths. And that is where I keep now one simple idea for what we can do now. After talking so much, there is a problem. Yes, I have created a problem because I'm the consumer. Yes, every consumption is a carbon emission. Yes, and each person of 8 billion is emitting carbon dioxide. So each person is a part of the problem. Yes, tell me, what do I do now? And what I tell Richard and David and Joy and everyone, what I tell people that I think we have very simple solution. We need to just follow truth of life. That cannot be. And what is truth in India? How we define the truth? Truth is something that does not change with the time. That is truth. So our body is not truth because it is changing all the time. Seasons are not truth, it is changing all the time. What is not changing all the time? 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. It does not change with time. Whether we go to moon or Mars, whether our GDP is growing or decreasing, it does not change with time. So 2 plus 2 is equal to 4 is the truth. Similarly, there is another truth that we must follow. That no matter how much our science grows, no matter how much technology grows, no matter how much economy grows, there is one truth that can never change. That is, the size of our planet cannot grow. The minerals on the planet cannot grow. The soil cannot grow. Humans do not have capacity to create an extra single atom on this planet. We don't have capacity to create one more atom on this planet. So whatever is there on this planet is finite. And therefore, only truth that you have to follow is that, look, guys, the planet is finite, resources are finite, therefore consumption has to be finite. When planet is finite, there is no way number of clothes in your cupboard can grow. There is no way number of vehicles can grow. There is no way buildings can grow. If at all you are growing at the cost of your water quality, soil quality, global warming, climate change. So on a finite planet, with the finite resources, let us have finite consumption. That every one of us, whether you're American or African or British or Indian, we have to follow this if at all we want to survive on this planet and sustain human life. That is the ultimate truth that we must follow.
Amen.
I fully agree with you, and I think you know that. I also see the other side. I very much see an economic angle. I see that there is a need for a currency, and this currency is fundamentally about energy. It's about energy saving is the currency, and it's nature's currency that represents the abundance of an intact nature. And I see that we need such a currency where we can buy our coffee with it, create our job with it. In other words, recreate our job by respecting, by allowing yet greater abundance, greater intactness to nature, as opposed to try to direct in whichever way, as a balance along, as a counter along. And I see that in part because if I look at what's going on at the moment, Jeff Bezos, kind of the Amazon billionaire, has made some projections about how by 2040 we would be up in space, and taking minerals materials from it. There's more conversation going on about how that's the solution to our climate problem: get out to space in the different forms that means. So they feel the finiteness that you describe, and their answer is very opposite to you. And there are very many people who are attracted to that. I met a young Indian who was interested in agriculture on Mars. And what would your answer be to that young man?
Well, my simple answer is that yes, there are some people who can actually go to the Mars, but most of us are poor people and we will not be able to escape to the Mars, right? So let's be the intelligent and behave properly so that we can live wisely on this planet, you know. And whoever young people are getting motivated, I think they don't understand that, you know, even if they earn seven lives, they will not be able to accumulate enough money to go to the Mars. Even if they go to the Mars, they are going to live in a tent. What a stupid idea! When you can live under the full open sky, why do you go and live under the tent? You know? So I think this is the height of stupidity that people get excited by such idea. Yes, we should all, as I said, we should all grow, but growing at the cost of, you know, your base of your life is a stupidity. You know how you cannot pollute the same water that you are going to drink, you cannot pollute the same soil that you are going to breathe, you cannot disturb the same environment where you are going to live. If you are doing that, I think nobody can be more stupid than we are.
Okay, I totally agree.
And by the way, Andrea, I keep telling everywhere, you know, I have given some 1700 talks and I keep telling everywhere the modern humans are the most stupid animal ever existed on this planet. And believe
I
me,
know.
nobody has taken objection to that. You know?
Yeah, and we're getting stupider. It's really crazy.
Joe?
All right, you've been
No,
quiet, Joe.
Well, I've been processing this and thinking about finite and consumption and efficiency, because I do understand why, you know, it seems like a really, really cool idea to say the way we got in is not the way we're going to get out. I I recognize that. I think that the goal or the target definitely has to be on the other side of things. It's kind of a reversal of things. But I think in terms of how we have to get out of things, sometimes is to use some of the other things that we know as science, right? In terms like if you think about if we go interstellar in terms of ideas, right? If we're trying to solve a problem and we're trying to get ourselves back on track, that there are certain ways to utilize the adversity that we have, or figure out things that could actually bring us back. So I do feel that we have to kind of increase the level of technology that we use that can say, okay, given these problems, how do we solve things better? How can we even get better than that? Like the example I'm thinking about actually is in space. If you're trying to figure your way back, let's say to Earth, and you are out of fuel, and the thing is, you go like, well, I'm out of fuel, I can't get back to Earth. Or you can think about science and go like, okay, if I were to use the gravitational force of the moon or some other body, I can use that to slingshot my way back, using science and technology. Right? It's a solving of the problem, using the science, and it's advancing it, taking to the next level. So I'm hesitant to just say that, okay, not doing it's the answer. I think doing it much better might be the answer as well. Like, is there something on the other side of this where we go like, okay, when fully developed, this is what's going to happen? Because for me, what I look at is AI and where AI can get to, right? If AI does its job really well, as much as we see it using all the energy and resources that it does right now, AI will also be on task to solve the problem of AI and energy. AI will also be on task to solve the problem for currency, as in, like, some people talk about in the crypto space, what's the greatest threat to crypto? And for them, it's AI, not because AI can break all of blockchains and what have you ultimately, but because actually AI may come up with a better way, right? So the thing that David talked about,
Yeah,
just
I
now,
mean, Joe, I think I got your point, and I think the point that you put forward is also shared by most people that I meet around, and obvious, because we have been trained mentally to think like that. But let me pull in some of the quotes again from the E.F. Schumacher's book "Small is Beautiful," and he has beautifully extrapolated the situation. How does the technology play a part in our role? For example, the first from a capitalistic view, we want to every capitalistic model want to maximize the profit in a let's say factory operation. How do I maximize the profit? I need to minimize my cost of operation. How do I minimize my cost of operation? By more automation. How do I automate? I put more machines and less men, because they machines make less mistake, they don't get tired, and they can work 24/7. When you extrapolate the situation, so he has written beautifully, when you extrapolate the situation, what is the end scenario is that you don't need any man actually. You all need machines, because that is where you are going to be most efficient from the technological perspective. So eventually, I think we defeat the very same purpose. The whole idea of using any machine or any technologies to help us make our life better, make comfortable. But we end up actually doing, overdoing things, and therefore there is a negative aspect of it. So in my understanding of the world, technology is definitely useful, policies are useful, but only when you follow the fundamental boundary conditions of living on this planet. And there are two boundary conditions. One, the planet size is finite and every resource is finite, so you must have a finite consumption. Number two, boundary condition is when, because resources are finite, if you're going to make a centralized production and distribution system, it is invariably going to result in unequal distribution of resources and wealth, which is going to create disparity, inequity in the society, and inequity eventually fuels to the lack of peace and violence. So limiting and localizing, if you follow these two boundary conditions, and within this boundary, then you are free to apply your technology policy, do this, let's do. But if you don't fix the boundaries, I think no amount of technology and policies, even if it is most advanced AI, is going to help us. That is my understanding of the big picture right now. And I hope I will be one wrong sometime.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I look forward to the day. Actually, one of the solutions that I feel that will lead to a good outcome actually is when we lose touch with everyone. If you don't have your ability to compare yourself, and then I think we were far better off when we didn't know what was happening. I mean, you think about what happened in China recently, like for COVID, it's now back in the rearview mirror. But China was the last place to come out of COVID lockdowns, and actually China was the last country that actually had such a low level of infection. Until what happened was the World Cup happened on TV, right? And as the World Cup happened, China watched the World Cup, and besides football, what they saw were large crowds of people. And they lost the ability to go, okay, we're gonna stay, we're gonna isolate and do all that kind of stuff that's gonna make us safer from COVID, for instance. And so that unleashed the whole thing, and because they saw and then they compared and they got unhappy, and then all the rest of it happened. I think one of the biggest problems we have really is the fact that we know of somebody else. We know of how somebody else lives better, has better, or we get educated or convinced of it. And if we didn't have that, sometimes I think in general, first of all, we'd be happier people, and we might also be in a situation where we wouldn't be in a race. You can't race what you can't see.
True. Very true.
I have a question, maybe a sort of a final question along, and there is this thing called the great wealth transfer that's happening, and that's very much the target in some ways of my book, Thriving at Nature's Pace. And the essence of nature's pace, I think, comes back to a comment you made about watching nature and the truth of nature in that sense. What is nature's pace? And if nothing else, if you start thinking about that, you're probably going to be moving in a better direction. And the question is, there is a lot of money that's going to be inherited by young people. The estimate is that by 2030, $20 trillion will be transferred to them. And these are young people, obviously, in Europe, America, but increasingly also very large number of them in places like India and China and the richer kind of parts of the economies around. It comes in like $1,000 here, $10,000 there. It's not really the billions that's going to be transferred in this way. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the fact that your mom has a house and that's worth something, and after you pay taxes on it, there's going to be some money that comes to you in that way, and your siblings in that way. What would you suggest they might do with this?
Well, I mean, if that happens in the lack of awareness of life itself, and how every consumption is a carbon emission, if a lot of young people get all this money without knowing and the broader picture, it is like digging their own graves. So yes, so that is why. By the way, when Joe was talking, what I have done is I have created a kind of a framework that will help individual, institution, industries. How do we cope up with the current situation and get out of it? So this framework is called Climate Action Framework, or rather Universal Climate Action Framework, because I believe it is universally applicable to all 8 billion people. What you have to do is three things. Number one, you have to become what I call is a consumption literate. So you have to understand, when you send a WhatsApp message, what does it mean in terms of energy and carbon emission? When you buy a pair of clothes, what does it mean in terms of energy and carbon emission, water pollution? When you travel through a train or flight, what does it mean? So every time when you're consuming a product or service, are you literate enough to understand the impact of that consumption on environment? So there is a 70 minutes module called consumption literacy capsule. I believe the whole world should be consumption literate because we are all consumers. Once you become aware, then second thing, you have to start thinking what to do now. Once I know that there's a problem in every consumption, what to do now? So then I have created what is called a 360-degree approach where you have to take care. Because David, what happens? Most people, most organizations that I see all over the world, a non-profit organization, they focus on one particular area. Somebody say, I will save the soil. Somebody will say, I will save the water. I will do this. That doesn't work, because the whole ecosystem is connected together. You can't save the soil in isolation, because saving soil will have something to do the way manner you purchase your clothes. Saving soil will have something to do the manner you eat your food. The saving soil will have something to do the manner you travel. So nothing can be done in isolation. You have to take care of 360-degree of the carbon emission. So I have come across, I have developed what I call is a TUPE climate habits, TUPEE. So each of these later takes care of 20 to 25% of global carbon emission. So T is travel less, use items wisely, P is purchase cautiously, E is eat carefully, and last is eliminate electricity waste. So this 5 category put together is almost 100% of global carbon emission. So I would say what to do once you are consumption literate, what to do? Adopt to peak climate habits, and everybody can do it. Then the question comes, how can I do this? Travel less means what I do. Then I have created another character called AMG, apply AMG action filter. For every action that you are taking, apply this filter AMG. What is AMG? A is avoid what is avoidable. For example, this summer, long distance travel for a fun is avoidable. I can figure out local things. So I can avoid that, because when I realize that a family of 4 people when travel, let's say 1,000 kilometers one way, we are going to put 2,000 kilograms of carbon in the atmosphere. That's a disaster, because this carbon once emitted will remain in the atmosphere for 300 years. Your one trip of the family can throw 2,000 kilograms of carbon that will be there in the atmosphere for 300 years, aiding global warming. So can I avoid it? Yes, once in a while I can avoid it. If you cannot avoid, let's say you can go to the minimize next, AMG. Avoid what is avoidable. If not, minimize with efficiency. Can you combine a couple of things together? For example, every day you have to go to office, but can you combine a couple of things together and increase the efficiency of your travel? So you are doing more things in one trip. So minimize it. And if not, last is G, generate or do it locally. If you can do locally, if you can walk locally, if you can cycle locally, if you can use two-wheeler locally, great. So apply AMG action filter in everything that we do in our life. When we want to use electricity, can we avoid in the daytime because sunlight is there? Can I minimize with efficient appliances? Can I generate it locally? So AMG is the ultimate action filter, and if you don't follow AMG, I keep saying you will have to say OMG, oh my God, things are not working. Oh my God, solar is expensive. Oh my God, policies are not there. So follow AMG so that you can avoid saying OMG. So these three things together, consumption literacy, 2P climate habits, and AMG action filter, I think this can be a guiding principle to any individual, any college, any school, any industry, any country. And I think this is how systematically we can make a transition from a very high carbon life to very low or zero carbon life, aligned with the nature, within the boundaries of the nature. And I call this kind of living as a finite living. Can we create a finite living as a new lifestyle, a new fashion lifestyle, when everybody loves to limit their consumption within the boundaries of the planet? I think that can bring a big change in the world when masses starts adopting it, and that's the whole purpose of my journey, is to bring masses on board and make it as a new fashion to adopt.
It's a
So,
Thank
Prof.
you.
Chetan,
fashion.
I'm just mindful. I'm mindful of time that we had today
Yeah.
as well. So I'm just thinking, where if someone's trying to look for the stuff, they want to swallow, they want to get all of it at one place. Where does someone find that?
Right.
Well, all these places at our website, thefiniteearth.org. If you go to the website, thefiniteearth.org, all this material is available there. The trainings are there. The beautiful programs are available. It's all free for everyone. We are trying to make it in multiple languages, including Hindi, English, all regional languages of India, but also in Spanish, French, Portuguese, so that the whole world can access it.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, that's really amazing. It's extremely inspiring. And you are in mid of your journey and going along. I think that wish you every success along with it. We're going to move forward in our program. We talk about the current affairs, what's been happening. You're very welcome to stay with us if you have the time. And I would personally love to be able to have another chat with you and talk more about what we can do together in this.
Yeah,
Well,
I just really appreciate the simplification. Like it really is simple. I know a lot of people push back on the individual consumption, but I always say we've got 3.8 billion middle class people. The billionaires are not the ones shopping 6 generations of clothes in the Atacama Desert or on the coast of Ghana. It's us. We're buying too much. We're consuming too much. We are thoughtlessly destroying our planet, and it needs to change. So I really appreciated how you simplified it down. And we've put your website here. I've just did a quick scan for the other one, but we can, through the energyswaraj.org, we can get to the finite earth one, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you can either one, energyswaraj.org or thefiniteearth.org.
Okay, I'll find it and add it. All right, awesome.
Thank you so
do you
much,
want
Joe,
to
David,
say or-
Andrea, and Richard, everyone. It was a pleasure talking to all of you, and thanks to David for connecting me and inviting me to this show. I hope the audience will like the discussion, and some of you start following the Finite Earth movement and become part of the Finite Earth movement.
Yeah, I think we're already on board.
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank
Bye.
you so much.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bring you all back up. Awesome.
Yeah.
Can you speak our language?
Well, very much so. And despite being, very much a man of science, everything he talks about resonates very much with me as not being a person of science, but someone of capitalism.
Was it despite being a man of science bit?
No, but normally I always clash with scientists, right? Because they take a very exact approach to things. But I think that the whole idea, which he kept repeating, and I know that it doesn't resonate with a lot of people because they refuse to really accept it, is the fact that it's finite. We do not have an endless pool of resources to keep digging from. And that acceptance needs to come before you can actually move on. Otherwise, you end up in the Jeff Bezos space. Let's go to space.
Yeah.
Well,
and I think that is really the big step to take. to
I
get
think
that
that
level of acceptance.
the history has told us differently, which is Joe's kind of comments along the way. In that way, the history has shown us that whenever people have said it was finite, some technology has come along and found new bits. So, for example, Brazil, which is hosting the COP conference, the Conference of Parties to debate on the next move from most governments on their actions on climate change, is starting a drilling in the pre-salt layer, below the pre-salt layer. This is very deep in the oceans, and it's very difficult to drill in that way. It's 8,000 meters below the ocean, in the oceans.
That's going to be a lot of pressure. Even I know that, despite not being a scientist.
And it moves.
Yeah.
So they're drilling below that into this sort of pre-salt layer. And that's the thing. The technology extends into it to make available what we had never found before. But there is a cost to all this, because the point to this is that when you solve one problem, you create two, which is growth. Because two problems means you can solve two problems and create four. And therefore, you can solve four problems and create 8. And that's growth. And if you're really good at it, you can solve problems and create 16, in which case you really are growing.
Yes, there is that point, perhaps, of looking at it as being able to extend what we think are finite things. But there are some things that are definitely finite, which we have not accepted as being so, because it doesn't fit our narrative and our vision of the world. And most of all, it doesn't fit our desires, which is always we want to do whatever we want to do. Why should there be any restriction?
That argument about the technology has solved problems, I think it's mostly 70s, 80s, 90s, when it goes back to agriculture, right? And the ability to grow significantly more food. I think that's the example that always comes up from a technological perspective. But that came up at a time when the Earth wasn't in the state that it's in. All of the water is poisoned and full of microplastics. All of the Earth is poisoned and full of microplastics, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, nuclear waste, right? The amount of land that is used for agriculture these days is 75%. And, an enormous percentage of that is to either for farm animals or to grow the food to feed the farm animals. Yeah. But technically there, that other 25% that's left, are we just going to chop down those forests so that we can keep growing? So technology, but the fermentation of food, all that sort of stuff, that's a technology that I think makes sense for the future to feed ourselves. But, when you see that direction that we've just constantly been going up with, but as we're going up, we're spewing out the waste and the pollution and the excess, and we're chopping down the tree. We're seeing, the Australian tropical rainforests are no longer taking up carbon and they're releasing it. We already heard that about the Amazon rainforest last year. We've seen the amount of fires that are in the environment, which are releasing, I think last year it was the equivalent of 200 countries CO2, the fires released. 200 countries CO2, right? So it's just while that problem was solved in the 70s, 80s, 90s agriculturally, and we kept growing, I think we're at the point where we can't keep, so I call it the tech hopium. Is tech going to solve some of our problems? Sure, it is. Of course it is, right? But the tech bros, it's all about that, and going to Mars. I mean, you look at the story, and it doesn't get a lot of coverage, but every rocket that crashes through the atmosphere and comes back down is doing damage to that thin veil that protects the Earth, but that's not getting a lot of media coverage because it's not of interest to governments or to private.
But it doesn't fit the narrative, right? Yeah. It doesn't fit the narrative. So
yeah.
But I think what you're saying here is super important. Someone like me is absolutely not anti-tech. but we cannot use technology as an excuse for not respecting limits.
Yeah.
And that's a very different approach.
Yeah.
It's not a prudent way to say, I shouldn't really worry about this because technology will solve it. It's like the argument is always, what if not?
Yeah.
Do you really want to be in that situation?
Yeah. So Joe's going to probably have to leave us maybe at 4:30. So we'll let's just.
It's a might be.
Let's just get rid of the AI component because we're already going to go over time. And let's move on to the news, right? So we've got to do it a little bit different. We're sort of playing around trying to work out a good agenda. So here's some of the news stories that I'm just going to go through really, really quickly, and we're going to break it up between four of us. So Diane Keaton passed away this week, which has been a really interesting storyline, by the way. First of all, nobody knows why she died, and apparently it's pneumonia. That's the latest that I've heard. But it's how she's positioned as a single woman who never got married, and how that's been sort of played with, where I don't believe what people are saying. It's like Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban. The story is around their marriage falling apart. Everyone's got an idea and a theory. It's kind of like, and people are consumed by this information, this news, which is part of the problem, right? The brain rot, which we didn't have time to talk about last time. But there was a great TV interview where JD Vance was interviewed by George Stephanopoulos on CNN, and they were talking about Tom Homan's $50,000 bribe. And I don't know, all the Republicans, they're all being very aggressive these days, right? But when he didn't answer the question, he cut him off. You could actually hear JD Vance speaking, but he was gone. If you haven't seen it, it's interesting. In Alaska, there's been these devastating floods, and they're attributing it to the Doge cuts in the weather system. So all these balloons haven't been going up in the air, and they weren't expected to land. That storm wasn't expected to land where it landed. People were sitting in their homes and they were being carried off by these floods. It was really, really crazy. In Mexico, we also saw devastating floods, 64 at least dead so far, and there's dozens still missing. The platypus, have you guys ever seen a platypus in the wild?
Not live, no.
No.
Only on telly.
I used to have a little family of platypus or platypi across for the river where I used to swim as a teenager growing up. They're a favorite animal, always have been. I love them. They're just the most adorable thing, but also you don't want to get too close. But anyway, Charles Darwin first saw a platypus in Australia on this very specific river, and it made him question everything he thought he knew about evolution. But the place where he saw that platypus no longer has platypi in the river because of all the toxins and stuff in the river. We've talked about Tylenol impacting autism, according to what's his name, RFK Jr. and Trump. Well, apparently, the new cause is circumcision.
Wow.
And it's because you take the Tylenol after you have your circumcision.
So contrarily, all the cultures which have circumcision, basically they're all autistic.
So the ones who don't, obviously, there's no autism. Researchers have found methane leaking out of cracks in the Antarctic seabed, and it's not a rare phenomenon. It is seemingly widespread. So that's a really big story. And finally, for those of us in Singapore, because of the extreme heat, I think I've said before, we used to have 4 days above the wet bulb temperatures, deadly wet bulb temperatures every year. In 2024, it's moved up to 188. And that means all the rodents and insects are moving indoors. So if you've seen a Singapore cockroach, I've had to get comfortable with them because they're just there. You can't get away from them. We call them names. So we've got Karen and Charlie and Cyril. They're always obviously, but they're huge. They're bigger than the Queensland ones.
They join you for dinner.
Yeah, exactly. So they're moving indoors. So so that's some of the news we're not going to talk about. But what we are going to start with, and I'm going to hand it over to David, is the ceasefire agreement in Gaza.
Yes, and first of all, I'm really pleased that they have a ceasefire. I'm really pleased that the hostages are returned. There are so many ways that this can fail in this way, and honestly, what I have to think is there are ways in which we can actually fix problems without them becoming problems first. And then there are ways in which we actually make them into problems so that when we then come in and say we fix it, we look great. And this falls to me very much like the latter. A year ago, there was second phase to a ceasefire agreement that would have exchanged all the prisoners and all of those things. Instead, the Americans and the Israelis pulled out of it in order for it not to happen, or whatever political reasons that there may be. And now what you see is actually we're back at a similar point, except there is a lot more people who have suffered through this. Yeah. So even though it's a great thing, and I hope that it holds, I think the celebrations are actually missing that crucial reflective element of saying, how did we allow it to get into this situation here? And then if we don't reflect on how we actually allowed it to get into this situation here, then we're going to look at those pictures where we had all the politicians standing up and in the frame, and you had Macron, you had Keir Starmer, you had the Indonesian president, and you had Donald Trump, of course, and congratulating each other on what is really a great failure on their part to have acted at the point when they should have acted. But of course, if they did, then there wouldn't have been such a picture. And there wouldn't have been such a sense of relief, because we don't miss it for some reason unless we are tortured. So that's sort of my part to this. And as for going on further, how would it go? It's really hard to tell. Will Hamas give up arms? It reminds me very much about Northern Ireland. What happened there? And there were many kind of steps in ceasefires and so on, and none of it particularly worked until we really needed a very strong kind of consensus along. But out of all the people that you see in the pictures of Gaza at the moment, when they come back to where they used to live, is now all rubble. I remember a conversation Richard and I had with a Israeli friend at the beginning. It was like the day after the October 7th. And he despaired, and he said, he was in Tel Aviv, he despaired, and he said, anything that's over 10 centimeters high in Gaza will be reduced to below that.
Yeah.
And when you see the pictures, that's what they have done. And when you come back to that, are you now going to embrace the Israelis for allowing you to come back to the rubble? So there's a long journey ahead. It's a really difficult one. I think from our part, keeping a sane head, not allowing ourselves to be swayed by the news of what may be happening or may not be happening and all those things, and keeping focus. It's people. These are people. Yeah. These are people we want to be with in one way or another. We want to share that sense of belonging. And if we can somehow convey that through whatever we do, that gives the much greater chance that this will progress in a better direction.
Yeah. All right, Joe, what's been your sort of feelings about it this week? And I emphasize feelings because to me it's been a feeling thing as well as a factual thing.
Oh, you sound like my wife now. Okay. I've got to be very honest. It's going to sound very cold that I don't harbor great feelings about things. In Gaza, for instance, it's for me, it's a big political chess piece, right? It's being used that way. And my early opinion was basically that it's both. They're being used as tools of distraction when appropriate, right? I think for me. And I may be speaking out of turn here, but I think Netanyahu is using Gaza to stay in power, right? That he was in real trouble, and the other things around this that basically it is not typical of the best of Israeli governing, in terms of what happened along the way and how it got to there. And so I think it's very political. I think it's just it's such a waste for me in terms of what could be in that part of the world, as in like it's and if I'm going to take a little parallel here, and I'm sorry about going there, but if you think about it as a market of goodwill, that there's so much value that's been destroyed in this whole thing, right? There is the actual buildings, there are the actual loss of life, and then there's also the goodwill, any possibility of goodwill in terms of the value or the Israel stock, if you like, in the world, right? It's kind of it's been devalued. It's been destroyed in this whole process. So that's kind of that where I come from this, and I don't have that. I'm sorry. The more appropriate thing would be for me to feel and have this big outpouring of it. But for me, it's more strategically. I'm thinking, okay, we should be better at this. We should be better at trying to figure our way out of things. And for me, one thing that I'm always working on is the story. And people, there's some people who are working on the story and they're using the story. So they're creating the stuff that makes the story work for them. But I think there are not enough people who are actually in there as well doing the same thing. To be fair about this, what has happened is, TikTok and other social media basically has allowed a different story to arise as well. As in, like, there's certain things, the urgency of this agreement right now. I mean, we obviously should have helped. The urgency should have hit us a lot earlier. But why it is being done now is that in the US it's become a really big thing, and the story has come to the point where it is unavoidable. It is the thing. Yeah. It is the thing that could distract from other things that are also distracting. Anyone want to talk about Epstein files? We can do that later. But
they still like that. They like that distraction. They like the distraction from that.
Yeah. So this particular thing is no Epstein file here. Gaza.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So I felt very, very somber on the big day. The big show. That's why I asked about feelings when I sort of put it out there at the beginning. I just felt like the people who have funded the war, who have maintained the war, and there's a lot of nuance in the background about what goes on and why the partnerships are like they are, and there's so much that we don't see as citizens of the world, right? So the sweeping statements, the singular viewpoints, we always try and avoid them. But watching that egotistical performance, Trump, I mean, we expect it, but there was a glee that just didn't sit well with me for what that day should. It's a very somber day, right? And it was things like the Palestinians were basically told they weren't allowed to celebrate the reunions with their loved ones, but obviously they showed extensive coverage of the Israelis with their reunions, which they absolutely had the right to celebrate. We heard, I think it was about 150 Palestinians got exiled, and they didn't even know, the families didn't even know it was going to happen, so they might not ever see them again. I don't think that Israel stopped because of the plan, as you were just saying, Joe. I think it stopped because it lost the narrative, and Trump and all the other leaders of the world couldn't continue to support it because we'd all had enough, and the protests were just they're just growing. So politically, it was just untenable. It didn't mean that Israel wanted to do it, especially the far-right Zionist group. They didn't want that war to stop. They still don't want that war to stop. But I think the permanent trust in Israel is lost. And I think I know that they're going to have a massive campaign to reclaim the narrative and get back in the world's good books. But I don't know if they can. I don't think that they can. I don't. But they're really, really good at it. So now we have this peace, right? And is Israel committed to the peace? I mean, when they sort of insisted it's all about the release of all of the hostages, including the dead hostages, many of those hostages will be under rubble. That is because of Israeli bombardment, and Hamas don't even know where the bodies are. So just that could break the peace, and be the excuse they need to go back to war. We're looking at people going back to their homes and there's bodies under the rubble, but they've also got these unexploded robots. Did you see anything about that? These things take out like a block, the most devastating piece of equipment. And, all the countries around the world, everyone's out of money. So who's going to pay for the rebuild? No one's talking about that yet. We see Hamas and Israel-funded gangs fighting each other and executing each other on the street. And then the devastation of infrastructure, just agricultural, more than 80% of agricultural land has been completely destroyed. So the Palestinians have no ability to feed themselves and they can't take care of themselves. So they're 100% dependent on foreign aid. And we're already hearing about all the prices going up, and Israeli goods that are for sale on the street, the prices are increasing 30, 40, 50%. And here's a group of people with no money at all. So then the big one is, of course, the poisons in the environment, which will be in the environment for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So, air, water, soil. So I don't know.
I think what we need to do. I mean, this is so this is the thing. Acceptance, right? This is the way that things are. It is where we are. It is where we start. And I think this is really important. It's the first step of my 6-step program to thriving at nature space. You need this program along. So this acceptance. We have all these things. They do worry us, but they are not really. We can't rely on other people to change them for us, to give us a better starting place. We have to accept that this is the starting place that we have, and therefore, how can we progress? And that next step is this belonging, the spiritual belonging. There is a place for us. There's a place for each one. There's a place for everyone in that way. And there's no easy answer to that, except if you actually do look at nature. There's a place for everything in nature. So why should that not apply to us? It only doesn't apply to us if we decide to have our dominion over it instead. Beyond that becomes the question of actually what can we then do? How do we then nourish each other? How do we let other people know that we're nourishing them so they can reward us? And that's the economic presence. And we need the economics. What you point to about the money and all those things, it needs economics. But the problem is when that economics has to be seen as coming from outside of it. If as soon as we do that, as long as we do that, the people who live in Gaza will not have a future because they will be forever labeled as being victims.
Yeah.
And they will have no dignity of knowing that they can nourish others so that they can be rewarded for it. And how they do that is something that by engaging with them, by thinking about how nature itself might work in such a place. And that's the nature's pace along with that. Beyond this, it's all a question of experimentation. We don't know what will work. And we know that if you only do what works, nothing different will happen because you already know it works. If it's something different that has to happen, you don't know whether it works or not.
Yeah,
and that's the part we understand.
I suppose it's a lack of confidence in the leadership of the world right now, David. That makes it hard for me to believe, that we could possibly move forward in the right way.
Things. Well, the one driver to this, in answer to that I felt really significant was the flotilla that sailed towards it. They were all turned around, but this also came through after that, along with it. And whether it's directly related or not directly related, if it was 1,000 boats, if it's 10,000 boats, that's what it is. Because at the end of it, the leaders of this world will never resolve these problems. They will only make it worse. They all stood there smiling on that platform. It made me so angry. Yeah. They were the ones who failed to act, who refused to act, who deliberately made it worse. So don't look to the leaders for it. Accept that they are useless for the things we need them to solve.
Yeah. Well, Richard?
Yeah, I'm a great cynic, right? Always have been, will remain so, and I think I cannot see the truth holding in any way because if Hamas disarms, they have basically lost their purpose in life, and Iran will just rearm another group. And Iran is tremendously on the back foot in the region, and they've used, Hamas as their pawns, and Palestinian people have suffered greatly for it. And Israel now has a great initiative, and they will try to do what it takes to effectively break Iran's ability to continue to influence its borders. They've virtually won the military fight against Hezbollah, and they will ensure that Hamas gets eliminated permanently. And Hamas will play into that trap. And the only change that I can see being lasting is if the Palestinian people themselves decides to get rid of Hamas as a force. And I don't see that happening. And why should they disarm? It's like you've given up your purpose in life. And that just means you get the stalemate for a while. And Israelis will probably pursue Hamas through other methods, but the war will continue. Because Israel really has the initiative now, and Iran has been battled back into what has been shown to the world is that the Irani backing means nothing, because they have no ability to come to your aid if you rise up. And Iran now on the back foot. My biggest guess what will happen in the region is that you will probably see things evolving in Tehran quicker than elsewhere politically, because Iran is under enormous strain.
In a lot of ways too, environmentally as well.
Environmentally, economically, it's a total mess over there. And I guess that's going to just shift the focus of where things are happening to Iran.
I mean, that bigger picture is really about China. So if you actually want to look at that in that bigger picture way, these are all ways America wants to achieve regime change in China. And Americans is all about regime change. That's what it's doing. So by applying the pressures along, and the latest thing about the response to China, the 100% tariff and all of those things, it is all intended as a way to try and break China. And the reason it wants to break China is because America believes that it needs to be first. It doesn't matter how small the pie gets, as long as it's first, it's quite happy in that way. Just wants to be that cherry on top of the pie. Doesn't matter if cherry is on top of a tiny little pie. As long as it's on top of it, it's quite happy. So it's happy to shrink the pie until it gets to be there. And that's what's going on in that bigger picture.
Yeah, I don't think I have to do so much on that bigger picture front. But I was going to say, Richard, do you want to go through the next bunch of news?
Very happy to. I mean, things have been happening everywhere in the world. There was effectively a military coup in Madagascar, where you ousted a very young, quite, shall we say, person with a different background. I believe he was a DJ before he became a president. It's, as we know,
we're not all bad. We're not all bad people.
No, exactly. There's still a little bit of confusion about what's going on, but what seemed to have happened was that the protests gathered force, and this is predominantly driven by the very young people in one of the poorest countries in the world. Madagascar is not rich in any way. And a part of the military decided to step in, and effectively it didn't seem like there were any real battles or casualties, but they dismantled the president, who has gone into hiding. Some stories say he's gone to France. But I think for me, what makes it more pertinent and really interesting is that it all basically came from young people rebelling over the living situation and their cost, and their ultimately lack of faith in the future of where the country at large were going. So I think that was, and we'll see how it evolves. My guess is, as always, as being the cynic, that once you're in power and power corrupts, because it does, I'm not sure we'll see general elections in 2 years or whatever the first promise was.
Well, I think on that, we had a number of youth-led rebellions toppling government over the past couple of years. And if you look at the world, the parts of the world where you have a more normal kind of population pyramid, where there are more youths, are experiencing that part of the world where the median age, half the people are kind of 20 years or below of age in that way. That's a very different world to the ones that we sit in sort of the more developed world. But the problem that they face, so you look at Kenya, where they had this youth-led rebellion before. Bangladesh had a similar sort of thing. Nepal had a very similar sort of thing. They all basically then run into the next problem, which is not so much that power corrupt, but that there is no money. They all have
I'm just gonna interrupt and say, come on, we'll move forward. These are just quick ones, not discussions. Remember?
No.
So von der Leyen.
Von der Leyen, also super interesting. She basically gets called from both sides of the spectrum for being crap at her job. And the vote of no confidence was raised by both, the leftists and the rightists. I don't think it happens very often, but I totally see where they are coming from. And I think the confidence in her is basically blown. I think my guess is she cannot survive in her position because there is no broad-based political support for her as a figure anymore. And whether she personally were involved or not in these decisions doesn't really matter because she's seen as the face of it. And there is general dissatisfaction with the trade deal with the US. End of story. I think that's kind of where we end up in that respect. But my favorite story of all, actually, and the most important one, I think, is the massive decline in insect bee population, butterfly population that's happening. And we've touched upon that before. And now you have more evidence of how large ranges of species are basically becoming extinct and the ones remaining are declining in alarming numbers. And what that means for food production going forward. It smells really, really, really bad stuff. I'm terrified, actually, of that outcome.
Well, talking about bad stuff, we're going to talk about climate tipping points now. So, but I thought before we did that, because this always touches the heart. If you've had kids in the last 2 decades, there's a very strong chance that Nemo has been part of your life. It was certainly a massive part of our lives when the boys were small. But even Nemo's at risk. So in the Red Sea, there's an area where they thought that they'd be pretty much safe. They were used to the sort of the temperatures. But in 2023, they found that the anemones had turned to ghostly white, and more than 90% of the clownfish population died. And this links to the really big news that we passed this week, which was that we have now officially passed the first climate tipping point, and that is the widespread death of the coral reefs. Now, you guys know, I've been saying it for a really long time. We've already lost the corals. We just don't know it yet, because there is absolutely no chance as we look forward into the future and as heating increases that we were ever going to recover from what's going on with the coral reef losses. But this is now official. So there was a Global Tipping Points Report 2025, and it's produced by 160 scientists from 23 countries. And these sort of reports, you'll see quite a few coming out just before COP30. But basically, it warns that the world is on the brink of reaching other tipping points, and which I'll go through quickly later, as we continue to rise, they say, towards 1.5 degrees, but obviously we already know that we are above that. So warm water corals are the first, and since 2023, the reefs have been enduring the worst mass bleaching events in the history, since we know and since we can record it, with more than 80% affected. So they basically can't cope with the rising heat anymore. They're talking about the far-reaching consequences, right? So obviously they're essential habitat for marine species, vital for food security for humans, as well as the sea life, contribute trillions to the global economy, and buffer coastal areas from storms. So as I've been watching the news this week, because to me, this is the most important news that has been released in the world this week. It doesn't feel like it. And even when I'm listening to the scientists speaking, they're still really nice, and there's lots of hopium and all that sort of good stuff. But it's like the scientists don't know how to talk honestly about this stuff, because if they do, they get abused and harassed and get death threats. And if But there's this false hope that seems to be coming through, and a lot of the focus is on the human impact, right? So I was doing a bit of a study. If we lose the coral reefs, we lose all life that depends on the reefs, and that's not just the clownfish that are swimming around it; it's the ones that come to lay their eggs. So there's a lot, right? 25% of all marine life relies on coral reefs for survival, and coral reefs only take up 1% of the ocean floor. So it's a critical habitat for food, protection, all that sort of stuff. So when we think about the collapse of the coral reefs, it's going to set off a catastrophic domino effect throughout the entire ocean. It weakens the entire ecosystem by disrupting the food webs in the ocean and outside of the ocean, because you've got to think of seabirds. It's going to destroy habitats. It's going to eliminate crucial ecosystem services. So it's not a 25% impact. I mean, if you think of if we lost 25% of the four basic food groups that we rely on, wheat, maize, soy, and rice, that would be devastating, right? But this, to me, it's the foundation of the ocean's food chain. So I actually think this is a story that is so much bigger, so much more devastating, like dead ocean sort of heading on that in that path. And I don't think I'm being dramatic at all. And I'm kind of getting a little bit annoyed with the people who are the experts, who even at this point don't feel that they can speak up and speak the truth. So the other tipping points, obviously the West Antarctic ice sheet collapse, and that's one of those things that I keep my eye on a lot. And there's a lot going on there, and there's a lot of reports coming out. The Greenland ice sheet collapse, the Amazon rainforest dieback, which they think is estimated that it's going to start happening at 1.5 degrees Celsius, which we're at now. The Atlantic Meridional Occidental Current, or Overturning Current, AMOC, which of course is going to send the entire northern hemisphere into an ice age. And of course there's other ocean currents and other glacial ice sheets that are going to be impacted as well. So they're the other five, but we're past the first of the six, which is coral. And I personally think that this is just massively devastating, terrifying, and I'm not surprised. Emotionally, I accepted this a long time ago. It's something I saw coming, but I don't know. What, your thoughts, impressions? Am I exaggerating?
No, absolutely not. And I agree with you. I'm somewhat critical of scientists in this sense.
Twice in a day.
In a day. Not the problem in my book.
I
don't blame him. God, it's impossible, right?
If you are a proponent in your field, you're a proponent. You are an expert in your field. You actually need to speak about the things that you see, or you're actually abdicating part of your civic duty in that sense. And obviously, I do not condone any death threats and them being harassed or whatever. But it's like if you don't speak up about these things, you've effectively dedicated your professional life to this field, and you don't speak. Then what's your purpose? And leave it at that.
Is the message just too devastating? Like, what's the point, right? Because there's no hope in the message, and people like hope, and I don't know.
Yeah, I think the challenge that scientists face, and sometimes is about also about, you know, when you're always reminded about what being a scientist is supposed to be about, and there is a definition that people impose on scientists, right? What a scientist is supposed to be. If you're an expert in this field, you should care about this field. Scientists may just be very curious people, and that's also one category of it. As in, like, you know, the scientist actually faced with the situation would go like, the Titanic seems to be taking on water. Let's see what the result is. I mean, that's what science tends to be about. You're trying to observe and see what happens as well. You may say indications. You may have some kind of a way of predicting stuff. I think the marriage is supposed to be between scientists and actuarists. You need somebody who is actually in the business of forecasting.
They're great.
I mean that really is, to me, that's actually it. About it's the marriage of statistics and wider studies. So, yeah, like I said, a scientist, a true scientist in a situation where something is happening, actually waits for the result to understand the phenomenon. And it sounds terrible. It sounds terrible, but that's kind of happened in the past as well.
But maybe that's not their job. Maybe their job is to communicate the facts, and it's up to us to communicate the reality of what it means. Like maybe that's more. Maybe we're asking for information from the wrong people.
I think it's the opposite. I think we've compartmentalized all of these things. We've said that's the scientist's job, this is our job, this is someone else's job. The fact is that actually, if you do that, then none of the message actually crosses the sidal walls of that compartmentalization walls. You actually need the people themselves to feel that. You need the scientists to feel that actually, I'm a human. We all need to play the fact that we are humans first, before we are scientists, before we are the communicator, before we are whatever it is. That's the only part that will allow us to actually appreciate and be able to express and guide what we do.
Yeah, so I think there's a bigger story going on here, just from sitting in this space for a really long time and watching how everyone's talking about stuff. I think there's like people censor me in conversations all the time because they are uncomfortable with talking about it, even if they start the conversation, right? So it's like people want to know the truth, but they don't really want to know the truth. And I think scientists have been trying to communicate the truth for a long time, but no one wants to listen to them, or they get attacked. Like Michael Mann's been brutally attacked for decades. I've got his book Science Under Siege, so that's on my list to read. But I think just from everyone that's in the movement that's trying to raise awareness around the issues that we're facing, every single person censors themselves a little bit or a lot because they have to, because no one's going to listen otherwise. But this piece of news, there's no softening this story. There's no making light of it. It's a big catastrophic event that's going to gradually get worse, and we're going to understand what it means. I mean, from the point of, if you live in a home behind a coral reef that's protected that's protecting reef surge, sell your house now before you can't sell it, because it's got that house has no future if the reef's dead, right? The $1 trillion economy,
which is also the wrong thinking, because it doesn't matter where you go. But
if nobody else is, well, no, exactly. No, I know, right? There is nowhere else to go. But
so this is the part of the narrative where, again, I come to acceptance in that way, and with that acceptance, you need that sense of belonging, that we are part of this planet, that we belong here, that it doesn't matter how it is, we have a place, and that's part of what nature is. And nature here is what I talk in my book, has a capital N. It is more than animals and plants. It is more than the lands and the seas. It is more than humanity and the rocks and all those things. It is more than this moment. It is all moments. It is that whole which has an existence and a purpose and a meaning of its own. And we're all part of that. And that's the spiritual belonging. That's the belonging that we have to have, because that's the belonging that allows us to accept all of these things and still be able to take a step forward. Otherwise, we're constantly calling on someone else to do something. And we know that doesn't work.
Yeah, it's definitely 100%. And we've talked about acceptance. We've launched the series last year with acceptance. And I think about the concept of acceptance a lot, and I'll read it in your book just to see how you've defined it, because I think it's really important. I was listening to someone just last weekend talking about their life and their economic impact, right? And I sort of made the point, we're already at the point where the economics of climate are having an impact, and it's not going to get better. So we're not going back, right? So I think if people just started to look ahead and say, well, what does the future look like? As terrifying as people think that is, what does it look like? So economically, what does it look like? Whatever way you, and maybe Richard, when you do the economy bit next, you can talk about it. But what does it mean? So I'm in Singapore, getting my boys through school, getting them through national service. After that, like, where do I go? Where do we go as a family? Which continent? We're going to have to live somewhere. I want to be around my mates. I want to enjoy what time we've got. So that's what I'm thinking, right? And it's not going to be an extravagant future. It's not going to be any of that sort of stuff. There's a community in my mind, getting people together and say, let's go and buy an old school and build sustainable homes and plant garden and become sustainable. That sort of thinking, right? But thinking ahead, what does it look like? But maintaining what you've got. That's not what the future looks like. So, and I don't think people really want to do that yet. They don't want to look at that yet. But if you get started now, come to collective living, intergenerational living, community support and sustaining each other, all that sort of stuff. That's a big part of the future. But everyone's still living in their family homes or their single homes and it's like, that's not what the future's about. And then resilience and strength and
Yeah, I mean, as you grow older, I think what you're touching upon is super important. You can't escape the impact of climate change in one sense, but you still go back to looking at what's the important bits for you in life. And I moved country a lot when I was younger, right? So before the age of 30, I'd moved 3 times. It's no big deal. You get new friends wherever you go. You're young, you're dynamic and all that, and you get friends. As you get older, I think one of the most devastating things that can happen to you is severing friendships and those circles that you built your social structures around. And I see it very much with my mom, who's pushing, towards 90. She's still, very much in great shape. Mentally, physically, she's deteriorating a little bit. But what keeps her going is the fact that she still has a lot of friends where she lives, right?
Yeah.
If she had been there in isolation, I'm fairly sure she would not be able to be in the spirit she's in. There comes a point, where those things become fundamental for you to have a thriving existence. And, good relationships with your lone child and your grandchildren, yes, and she speaks, etc. But that social structure is incredibly important, that you have things to do and people to talk to when you are at that age. When you're in your 20s and 30s, like, you find new friends all the time. You build relationships that last for decades after that. You're not really going to find new friends at 90 that will last decades.
But I suppose that's the thing I'm talking about. That view of 90 in today's future with the coral reefs collapsing.
Yeah, I totally see the despair of young people that they don't envisage that happening.
Well, actually, I don't think that's right. I think they do. I think they get into this complete anxiety, panic. I mean, and the way to deal with that is to ignore it or whatever it is and so on, because they feel useless. The economy doesn't serve them.
No, the economy doesn't serve them.
Basically, that's the reality of this, and that's the whole point of what Richard and I are talking about and what we are doing, and that's the whole point of having a mechanism that can allow them to have that agency. You can choose your barrel of oil to keep in the ground. It's your choice, and you can make money doing it. It's not a sacrifice. What will you do? That's your choice, and that's the difficult part for many of the people in looking forward at the moment, because when they see this and the coral reefs are gone and the ocean food chain's gone, then the land food chain's gone, and all of those things. How is it an answer? What is it that you do? And the techno bros and the techno savior crowd is going to be, don't worry, we will make we'll print 3D fish, we'll print our print meat and all those things. You can have those things. And the cycle, that what that does is it makes it dependent on someone else. It makes you feel increasingly dependent on a structure and a framework that you need to rely on for you to be able to continue and have what you want. And that's the problem with it. That's the difficulty it faces. Sorry, I'm feeling a bit dizzy. That's why.
No, that's cool. All right. So I'm just looking at the time. Joe, do you want to do another quick run through of some news, and then we'll do the global economy and sort of try and wrap up?
Yep.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Let's head around, because I'm just going to disappear for 2 seconds. I'll be back.
Okay. So while she's away and while David's all dizzy, we're going to talk about Antifa. So you may have heard about Antifa, the big bogeyman. And to be honest, I think a lot of people don't know who Antifa is, except some people are happy to try and create government policy around something they don't know. Antifa is actually just a movement. It's a movement about anti-fascism, and it's an international. It is just out there. It's like feminism. So Antifa has its roots actually, of course, in the time of the World War II and Hitler and all that. So basically, it's just a short form for the idea of being anti-fascist. We've had a story of a scholar in the U.S. who eventually had to leave. He felt that he had to leave for the safety of his family and himself. And actually, in the process of trying to leave as well, he was stopped, which is pretty interesting in terms of news, because that means that it's not just about the keeping out of people; it actually is the keeping in. And we're talking about not a foreigner; it's an American. Trump Trump always loves publicity, but he does not love what he saw on the cover of Time magazine. A pretty favorable article in terms of talking about Trump and what he's done with the Middle East. But the photograph that they chose, shall we say, isn't flattering. And I can see from the perspective of why it isn't flattering, but I can also see why it was a really great picture. But if you can say wattle, I think you know what the issue is. You know, the flap, the way your skin holds. There's a thing about there's a thing. Oh, stop it. There's a thing about
that's the gag going around.
Yeah. There's a thing.
He's
about
grabbing himself by the pussy or something. That was one of the lines I saw.
Oh my lord. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's nice.
Family show, folks. Thank you very much. Anyway, so that is probably it. So despite that coverage in Time and the front page coverage as well, he was very critical about the photograph they used. The photographer very seldom has to come into this, but he defended himself, saying that he thought he was actually portraying Trump in a rather thoughtful and softer light than usual. And if you look at the photograph and you didn't know it was Trump, you would think, yeah, that's a picture of a gentler, older man. But obviously not so much. Still vain. We have an interesting story with a character we usually don't find ourselves agreeing so much with. If you've recently found yourself agreeing with this person, you're not going nuts. She is changing. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who rose to power and prominence, basically by being all out MAGA. Well, she is MAGA, but her definition of what MAGA is not in line with the rest of the Republican Party. And so she is now speaking in support of Obamacare, keeping the subsidies in place. And also, of course, she is very, very much in favor of releasing the Epstein files. There is a story about a migratory bird that has been declared extinct, and this is again one of the markers. I would say it belongs in the set of things that we might put into markers. The slender-billed curlew is officially now extinct. So, Richard, I think it's on to you for the global economy.
Well, there's a lot to chew on, over this last week. I think the first and foremost story for me is gold, and with its silver, platinum, palladium. It's very, very rare in my experience that you ever see markets carry on with this kind of grinding fashion. Normally in bull markets, you get explosive moments at some point where everyone wants in. The classic FOMO, get me in at any price. Gold has not experienced that yet, and still it's up almost 80% this year, and silver is up a bit more. It is what I would describe as a bulletproof market that just keeps going up. The only selling you see is coming from gold miners, producers that are selling spot gold into the market. You have speculators, you have individuals coming on board, but most of all, every time there is an attempt of selling off, central banks, particularly Asian central banks, are on the buy side in large numbers. And I'm, on one hand, surprised it took them 30 years to realize that, the dollar is probably not what it was they signed up for. And for the smaller Asian central bank, excluding China and Japan, and perhaps Taiwan, who has sizable reserves, and even Korea, you here have a moment where you can diversify out of your dollars and yens and euros and pounds into a hard asset. And you can probably do it in relatively smooth fashion and get something that's more tangible, because the new world order is not what the old one was. And those currency reserves you're holding are not going to be doing the job that they were probably set up for once upon a time. And if you go back to why countries are holding currency reserves, it's effectively to protect it from a sudden shock of trade barriers and trade deficits, so that you can actually use the currency reserves to ensure that you have a flow of goods that are essential to keep the country alive. That becomes more questionable now, and that's why I think you see the revaluation of gold in a way we haven't seen before. I lend much less credibility to the story which says that we're about to blow up paper currencies and they will no longer be accepted means of trade. I think that process will take much, much, much longer. But the diversification argument from people who are structurally underweight a hard asset and have zero confidence in crypto, I think is very true. And, I've been an owner of gold for 30 years. And I see absolutely no reason to change that position here. If anything, the price action we're seeing makes me more convinced that we're only in the really, really early phases of this rally. And ultimately, I think we're going to 25, 30, 40, 50,000. Wow. And that's sort of, for me, where you will end up almost by default, given the policies you have in the world and how actively governments are debasing their currencies by not doing what's actually they should be doing at this point. Their inability to restrain spending is ridiculous.
I'm just looking at gold simply on as an indication of this, that the whole world wants to get out and the only exit is gold.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, at the end of it, it's not even going to help you there. But in the meantime, in this process, you only have one asset in the world that offers enough liquidity for institutional players to allocate capital into, if you want to get out of paper assets and fiat currencies. So I think it's a story that actually dominates everything that's happening around us. It was very interesting to see First Brands collapse in the US. It has had much more repercussions than you think a $5 billion debt would have. Some of the smaller banks have been hit very hard that are sitting on a lot of these paper. Some hedge funds have been taken down quite hard. But I think the biggest story was basically, I think it was Singapore's wealth fund GIC actually pulling lines on one of the medium-sized Wall Street banks, which was Jefferies, because of their exposure to First Brands and what that can lead to. In the words of one of the great hedge fund managers and sort of particularly in the credit space, Howard Marks, who is the founder of Oaktree, he once said, in the best of times, people make the worst decisions, and in the worst of times, people make the best decisions on investments. And what we're seeing, I think, with First Brands is the former. When things were really good, credit standards at banks dropped dramatically, and businesses and people who were able to access credit at terms that were actually not realistic given their economic position. And I do think this is the top of the iceberg we're seeing, where as a lot of loans that were taken with particularly 5-year maturities are rolling off from really low rates pre-COVID and into COVID and are now being reset higher, these borrowers cannot cope because they actually don't have the cash flows to service that. And in that sense, I do think this might, in a sense, be a little bit of a canary in a coal mine moment for the really leveraged borrowers. And then we have a lot more pain to come in that space. That's for sure.
So that first brand, they were automotive supply, right?
Yeah.
So was that a tariff impact?
I think they're blaming everything they can. Ultimately, I think when you are borrowing so much that everything has to be perfect for you to be able to maintain your debt payments and your amortization, you become very vulnerable. And I'm sure there were other things, and tariffs didn't help. Let's be clear about that. But I think there were a myriad of things that basically threw their business model off course, because it's like leverage works both ways. It's great when things are going great, but the minimum distortion, you become extremely vulnerable, and they resurface very quickly as the first victim here. But I'm certainly confident it won't be the last one.
So when the 2008, the GFC happened, I don't know who was first. Was it Fannie Mae? There was one. Somebody was first. Is this
Countrywide?
Is this
Countrywide? Yeah.
Is this right? Is this a first? Do you think?
I think it's a first. I don't think debt levels in relation to balance sheet and assets are as aggressive as they were in 2007 when we started unsurfacing, a lot of bad mortgage debt. I think it's a problem, and I think it's a problem that will become a lot bigger before it gets resolved, and you will allocate losses everywhere. I do also think there is one fundamental difference which paradoxically might make this worse down the road. In 2007, 2008, effectively central banks in the whole world went to zero, and they could go to zero. And although gold went a little bit higher and other assets went a little bit higher because you could finance anything at zero rates, and you put the floor on these price falls, I cannot see central banks in this inflationary environment accommodate to that extent. I think they will cut rates if this gets worse. I think they will go quite a lot lower than they are now, but I do not see a return of zero rates, because then gold will trade like 50,000 very quickly. And at that point, yes, you will have people moving away from paper currencies as an acceptance mean of payment, because there is zero confidence left.
So another thing I was noticing, because AI and the economy is always sort of put together, and everyone's talking about the bubble. And so one of the things that I was reading was the AI investment by the tech industry isn't debt; they're cash-rich companies. So that means it's different than if they were going into debt to invest in this massive infrastructure sort of thing that they're doing. What do you? I mean, it's always in the news. Have we hit the bubble yet? What are you seeing? Because you don't ever seem particularly concerned by that one.
No, it's not true that the investment in the in the AI industry is not cash. I mean, when you go along and you say, okay, who are the people financing the next round of investments into this? It's not the tech bros putting up the cash, it's the private equity, it's the pensions, it's those sort of people along. Right. And all of those is part of a very leveraged system that goes along with that. And they are invested in all these other things which are leveraged along with it, like first brands and all these things. So when you go along and you say, Google is a cash-rich company, or Amazon has cash, and so on, and therefore Amazon's expansion is not cash, that's not true. Because the expansion is actually driven by a lot more of leveraged money that's coming into it, and it goes along in that way. The point, I think, the aspect of gold and so on is you have in this discussion, to bring it back into kind of siloing and all the rest of it, you need to bring into this discussion the coral reefs. They matter because there is no place. And so the comment that Richard has of saying, well, you know, people move into gold and so on, that's what all the financial people talk about. But the reality is there's no point moving into gold when your coral reefs are dead. And which one is going to hit you first? Is the coral reefs that are dead, is the driver that will force the shifts. It's the real environment and the real physical world that will be the driver, and that will bring the collapse to the economy. It's not going to be because of some leverage thing here breaking off and some other bit breaking off there, because those regulators can step in and says, you know, we'll just buy them out, we'll do this, we'll print this, and we'll do whatever it is, save 10,000 jobs here or whatever there. So this thing will go on until that, what I call climate leverage, the pretense that we can keep borrowing from a stable climate, and pretend that nothing will happen.
Yeah,
that's the prick, the bubble that bursts along with it. And so all these analysis where we go, oh yeah, you can then move to Bitcoin, or you can move to, you know, kind of utilities, or you can move away from this and put your investment there. The reality is everything is heavily reliant and is borrowing on a climate condition that doesn't change.
Yeah.
Well, the coral reefs and the tipping points you mentioned is they are changing now.
Yeah, so we've hit the planetary bubble, right?
Yes.
By having that first tipping point rather than the AI bubble, which everyone is obsessed about. And so, like when you think about it from that perspective, because of course there's no encouragement to think about it from that perspective. You know, all of these conversations are separate, right? But you think about it, like you're talking to my mum, pensioner in Australia. She's doing all right, you know, or my brother, you know, renting, got a job, not rich. When they hear conversations like that, they probably sit there and go, oh, it doesn't make any sense to me. So how do we help just normal people who don't have your minds and don't think about the stuff that you think about and your experience that you've got, and as well as what we all sort of care about? How do we help them sort of just think about this time? Because I think that's what people are struggling with, how to make sense of this time as far as it relates to them. You've got any thoughts, whether it's an economic perspective or an acceptance perspective or resilience or whatever?
For me, it's one question: do you believe that things are changing?
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that change is coming? And if your answer is to that is no, I think it's going to look the same in 10 years' time. So if I talk to my local MP and I talk to him about, you know, what's his plan for, you know, where I live in 10 years or whatever, and he has the same plans, and I ask him, do you believe things are going to change? And he basically is saying no, because he has the same sort of politics in that way. Then go and talk to someone else. Basically, just go and talk to someone else. Don't bother trying to persuade people. The job of persuading belongs to climate change itself. They will find it. They will discover the reality. That's the truth about it. But if they say yes, then actually start talking to them about how we can engage and work together and be part of supporting each other.
Yeah.
So don't try to spend your effort trying to persuade people who've already fixed their mind or whatever in thinking it doesn't matter. Oh, you know, I'm 85 and, you know, I've got another 10 years of good living I can manage. I'm just going to do that. That's fine. I'm just not going to waste my time with you, because my time is far too important now to be able to bring together that belonging.
Yeah. Jonathan, back to finding the right narrative. It's exactly right. It is about, you know, because I talk to people who are talking about a future that I know is not going to be around, and in lots and lots of different ways, right? But there is a different future, but they have to be ready to speak about that future. And if they're not, it's you know, people say to me, "Oh, Andrea, I'm thinking about buying a house here. Should I?" I'm like, well, what's going to happen there? And in the next 10 years, how hot is it going to get? What's the flooding predictions? What is it at fire risk? Is it if it's outside of a flood zone, how far outside? How high is it out above? Just ask the questions. I've talked about this before, but all these billionaires running off to Dubai because they don't have to pay, or millionaires because they don't have to pay tax. Well, that's on the strip of the land around the world that's going to have to be evacuated because it's too hot. And some of there is crap, right? It's really crap. But in the meantime, the home that they're going to leave behind, that they're going to be forced to return to, is going to degrade. So by the time they actually are forced back there, it's going to be a shit place to live. Whereas if the wealthy people stayed in their countries and invested in their countries and helped get those countries ready for the future, they might be good for everyone. So it's that there's this thinking that's, I don't know, just we need to flip stuff around. Richard, you're smiling.
Yeah, I have not confidence in that trajectory, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know. Neither do I, by the way.
No, but there is always hope.
Yeah.
So there is always hope.
The bunkers, the billionaire bunkers, they're talking about them again.
Yeah.
There's no point in having a bunker if the rest of it falls apart.
No, that's true.
I think the challenge is not knowing that something is going to happen. The challenge is what people think they should do, right? I mean, I think if you look at the way the world works, and if you knew in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, exactly when a big flood's coming, right? What would you do with that, right? You would probably work at getting your resources together to survive the flood as best as you can. It wouldn't be usually you wouldn't be as involved in the process of saying, okay, how do I stop the flood? So the wealthy, if you think about what the wealthy might do in facing the future, that the common future that we have, it is much more likely that they are going to try to be best prepared for what they think. Also, I think is the forgone. It's the foregone conclusion. So I don't think that there is an issue in terms of like who believes what, or if they don't believe what's happening. I think they do believe it. I think that what they're doing is just behaving as they would, given that it's true.
Big element.
The leaders know. They know exactly what's coming. They're preparing for it. If you don't want people to gossip about something, you put a lie on the shelf, right? You don't hide it.
Yeah.
Everything it's all in the public. Everything that they're doing is in the public, and yet everyone's sort of sitting back, going, "Oh, no, we don't have to. We don't. We can't. We don't believe in this." I'm like, but the people that you believe in, they believe in it. But they don't have the right vision. They certainly, I think, the whole the network state cities and stuff that they're building, I think they're way off the time scale. I think they're too late to get started now. But they don't have the vision. They don't have the long-term thinking. So we've got to rely on and short-term micro benefits. I mean, I'm very much of, I just want to enjoy my life and my family and my friends, and do everything I can to, contribute to maybe getting us off this path. But this coral reef story, I don't know.
I think there's a big difference here. There's back in 1920s, there's an economist called Frank Knight, and he made this distinction between risk and uncertainty. And risk is basically what the whole world is now focused on in his thinking in that way. And risk is essentially something you don't know, but which you can have a probability of some assessment of what may happen. So businesses are all about risk because they implicitly presume that, here's a market, we do this, that can be an outcome. There's so much chance of this happening and so on. What Richard was talking about in terms of going to 50,000 is essentially about risk. It's the projection of here's where the money will be, and in his description, here's this sense that there's so much money more to go. This is what the value might be. Here's how much gold would be worth at 50,000 versus 4,000, which is like about $30 trillion in total, no, $300 trillion or something in the world. Actually, even more than that. So, but uncertainty is where you don't know at all. You cannot tell. And that's what we face at the moment. We face uncertainty. And in this situation, you have to ask, what do I think is the step to take? So Joe's comment, if I know a flood is coming, then I have a risk assigned to it. If I cannot say what is coming, I do not know if it's flood or if it's drought or whatever, or that we have a fantastic world. And that's the point. There is a chance in this uncertain world, everything may be equally likely along or whatever it is, that it can still be a fantastic world because all the techno bros might be right and all of that too. Or something else comes
Or we could
along.
have a volcanic eruption, right?
Or we can have a volcanic eruption. And insurance guy
things down. Give us a bit more time, right?
Earthquake activities have increased 5 times.
Yeah.
To their measures in that way. And in all of this along, in this uncertainty, you then have to go back down to what makes you you, because that's the path that you need to travel. And that's the story that you need to have, because you can't go along to someone else's or some other story. And that's the part which we are actually very good at on that individual basis, but we're very bad at in thinking, how can that be an economy? How can an economics actually come from something like that? Because all of our economic thinking is about risk and reward, not uncertainty and thriving. And we don't know how to thrive with uncertainty, but that's what nature does all the time.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I reckon we've got to wrap up. We've gone way over. And by the way, we had so much more. We had so much
Yes,
more to
as usual.
discuss on the list. And but this time I thought I'd really skim just down to just 3 core topics. But even then, it was great to have Chetan. Thank you so much, David, for getting him. It's been really great, the conversation. You know, Jonathan towards the end, and we had Cecile and Shadrach and Steve sort of commenting earlier. Really great to listen to Chetan. He was just awesome, right? And total realist. Jonathan's asked somewhere else, what is the best specific form of words to start the conversation? I'm with you, David. I think if people ask, I'll talk. But if they don't ask, you can't. If you force it on people, they just block you, right? So, what's keeping you distracted?
Christmas.
Well, I am going to tell you that if you haven't started the series yet, you might want to. There are a number of good shows I've noticed of late where it reflects so much about what's happening in the world. And this one is Andor. Andor, it's been around for a while. I think the series has it's not wrapped up yet. It's in the middle of its run on Disney Plus. It's from the world of Star Wars, and in there, again, it's a fable about a different place, but it's about us. You know, it's about what's happening in the U.S. It's what's happening. There is stuff in there, and I don't want to do any spoilers or what have you and all that. But there'll be moments if you're watching it and thinking about the world, you're gonna go like, oh, that's Gaza, that's the U.S., that's Israel. You're going to see all the different players in a story about a time a long, long ago in a planet far, far away. Remember, of course, it's a work of fiction, but it's a good show. Andor. Take some time to warm up, but it's worthwhile.
Okay. David, Richard?
Oh, for me, it's Christmas, right? You need to.
Really? You were serious already?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have 2 kids in different cities. I have my mom up in Stockholm. I have family in Italy. Try to organize all this to a schedule that actually keeps everyone happy. I should have started earlier in the year.
Oh, that's so funny. That's going to be my first Christmas without one of my sons. And then both of them are going to be away on my birthday. I was like,
Oh,
Aw.
yeah, that's going to happen one day, right? All right, David, I know you've been really focused on your book. You put the link up there with the promo code.
Yes.
And I'll
So
promote
I want to
it
say
later.
that's been occupying me.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to say that's the link. It's a short link I created to get to the publisher site easier. So WSB20 because it's World Scientific Books, and it's 20 because 20% discount from them for people who want to buy from them in that way. So please go for it. I hope it will come out in print in time for Christmas. So Richard, you can buy it for your friends.
exactly.
Presents if that's what you're doing. I can't guarantee that because I don't know the printing schedule, but anyway, you can give them a copy of the cover and say it's on this way. So that's been occupying me. And I really want to push forward with that. I've developed a 6-step program towards thriving at nature's pace. And anyone wants to know more about that, please connect with me on LinkedIn, and look forward to it.
Yeah, and good luck. And just to anyone who listens regularly, buy David's book, support him. I think people who are spending a deep amount of time looking for solutions, and there's a lot of fantastic solutions around in different areas, and we need all of them, and we need to be considering all of them. So really support David, and anyone who spends this amount of time pulling a book together, as we all know, deserves the support. And Joe, I'm still on your back about your book. Yeah, and so my recommendation is I've been watching Mobland. Have you guys watched it?
Yeah,
It's,
one episode. Yeah.
Pretty grim.
Yeah.
So it's the underground in the UK in London, but it's Tom Hardy, who I'm a big fan of. Pierce Brosnan is like the patriarch, and Helen Mirren is the matriarch. And my God, she is a nasty piece of work. She's the nastiest of them all. But so it's a good yarn if you like your mob stuff. So I've enjoyed watching.
I presume you're talking about her character rather than her.
Yeah, absolutely. She's a fantastic actor. She does so many great things. Anyway, thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks for all the comments. Congrats on the book, David. And we'll see you all next week. Now, next week is that when we're doing sustainable tourism and community building? Is that right? Sound right?
We need to connect with Sadaf. Yeah.
So we've got a double theme. So it should be a good one.
Yeah.
All right. So we will see you all in a week. Take care.
Take care.
Okay.